Hello, I'm Jacob, and this is the Prepper's Bunker Outdoors. I want to talk today a little bit about socialism and Donald Trump's recent State of the Union address. I think one of the most important things that Donald Trump said that is being tweeted, reposted, whatever, constantly right now was America will never be a socialist nation. We were born free and we will die free. And what I want to talk about is the first part of that statement. Because it's meant to have some power, and it's meant to kind of show that the progressive agenda and the direction that it's heading in can never be successful. Here's the problem. We need to define socialism if we are going to fight against socialism, right? That's fairly basic. I have a good understanding of what socialism is, but for this video I thought, you know what? I'll make sure that I look up what socialism is so that I have a better understanding when I make this video, or I can clarify the point that I'm trying to make more clearly. And I found definitions of socialism that varied widely from fascism to communism and everywhere in between. And there's good reason for that, because both fascism and communism are forms of socialism, where individual liberty is put aside for the good of society. But the reality is socialism as a political form itself is the precursor to fascism and ultimately to communism. The difference between socialism, fascism, and communism is socialism, being the first step, needs to have universal government-controlled social services. And, Paul Alinsky defined what's exactly necessary, but to keep this simple, the government is made responsible for the well-being of the individual, whoever that individual is deemed to be. The difference between that and fascism is, in fascism, the government, which allows private business to exist, regulates private industry so heavily that the only industry that can survive is industry that is chosen by the government. So essentially, at that point, capitalism is dead. Our entire medical system in America is fascist right now, through regulation and government interdiction. Then in communism, the only difference between communism and fascism is that the government does not covertly own and operate all business. It overtly owns all business. And today, people try to separate these systems from the economy. For instance, China says it has a communist government, but is now running a more capitalist world economy. And while this is true, business is so heavily regulated in China, which I got a little bit of firsthand experience with that, with new smaller knife companies popping up, that it's still communist, but essentially what you have is you just have a totalitarian douchebag government that owns the people and allows them to do what they want to do. It's not technically communism, it's just in the same field, in the same political field as communism. So you really definitively cannot separate the economy of a fascist and communist nation from their political viewpoint, because it is a key part of what defines those terms. In America, we have had universal health care since 1989, when hospitals lost the right to refuse service based on the ability to pay. So before 1989, hospitals were privately owned businesses oftentimes by churches and oftentimes very charity-based. And if you go in there and you can't afford something, then you don't get it. Pretty simple, right? The second that the government takes that ability away from the privately owned business, it's no longer really a privately owned business. It is now fascist. What we have done by degree and insurance is strengthened this fascist bond in that industry with insurance and everything else until, if you fast forward to 2019, of course we have a federal standing military. We have no private legal militia. We have severe federal regulation on law enforcement. We have federal education, basically overtly federal health care. We have a social system that we have our welfare system. Basically, going back to LBJ and before, we have our welfare system that just absolutely promotes the continuation of socialism. So the other quote that's been going around is the problem with socialism is that once it's voted in, you have to shoot out. We have been a socialist nation for decades. America has been a socialist nation. Now, a president that has enacted more gun control than has been passed in 10 years just goes up and says, we are not a socialist nation and we never will be, and everybody claps and applauds as if, you know, a murderer can just say, I'm not a murderer, and that was that, okay? And Trump is not solely the problem here. This has clearly been a downward slope since LBJ and before LBJ. But the problem is that saying that I referred to, once you voted in, you have to shoot your way out. We've had an obligation to shoot our way out for decades now. And instead, we are hoping to regain freedom by degrees, unsuccessfully. We will not regain freedom through the voting system because the system has built itself to defend itself. So, my problem is, before Trump was elected in the primaries, I did a video. Sadly, I took it down. I'd like to see if I could find it in my archives on my hard drive. But I said that if Trump was elected as president, we would have a mass shooting within 6 months, and within a year, he'd be pushing gun control. It was never hard to see. It was never hard to see. But my problem is that people are so worked up in picking a team and rooting for their team that they no longer hold their team accountable. And at that point, it's not Democrats versus Republicans, or how it should be. It's not evil versus good. It's red team versus blue team. People don't care about the topics that they're actually arguing about, which are all just distractions and pointless things to keep us talking about while they continue to piss on us, because it's the government versus the people. But we've lost sight of what it is that freedom actually is, which is the second part. We are born free and will die free. Who in the piss thinks that when you're born and you go and get your Social Security card that you're free? Who in the piss is free in America right now except for the political elite, which are the same as the business elite, which are the same as everything else? This is powers and principalities. So before you go on chanting that America will never be a socialist nation, start thinking about what it's going to take to make America anything other than a socialist nation, because we have been a socialist nation for a long time. We're well on our way to a fascist nation, not because Trump and Republicans, really because of Democrats pushing it and Republicans giving into it. This is not, before I get into anything else, guys, the people who should be holding Donald Trump accountable more than the Democrats are the people that voted for him. If you voted for Donald Trump, you believed that everything that he said was true, and now you see the gun control that he's pushing. He got Kavanaugh elected, and everybody was cool with him being elected as long as the Democrats lost, and yet he's has a long-standing history of pissing on your rights and on the Bill of Rights. Now Trump's electing this anti-gun dude. I don't even remember his name, and I don't even care. Why, if you see this, if you have the mental ability to see what's going on, you have a responsibility to hold your own party and the person that you voted for accountable. It's no longer time to get in the red corner and continue to shout for your team, because it's time for you to realize that your team lied to you. And really, if you're a Republican and you want to fight for the Republican team, you have to admit you made a mistake and elected a socialist. Am I glad that it's a socialist with red, white, and blue sprinkles instead of red and yellow sprinkles and a hammer and sickle? Yeah, I like the patriotic flavoring better than the alternative, but the flavoring does not change what the cake's made out of. Yeah, so really, really pathetic. Really bad spot that we're in, and it's really disappointing to see how people that I hold in high regard are handling the situation. It's time to wake up, think about what socialism actually is, research it, and look at our current situation realistically, and realize what it's going to take to change it for your children. Because you're not going to get rid of it through the system. The system created it, the system is defending it, and the system will strip you of your ability to destroy it long before you get the motivation to give up your beer and your football to actually try to do something about it. So anyways, I'm sure that I don't have to ask you to let me know what you think in the comment section. I'm sure you guys will be hitting it up. Guys, wake up. Wake up. This is socialist America. It's been socialist America for a long time. The people who say that they're fighting for our rights really are not fighting for our rights. And it's time to stop playing for the lesser of two evils and actually start standing up for what's right. Because the lesser of two evils over a couple hundred years has led this nation to the exact same spot as the Roman Empire, and we're just waiting for calamity. So have a blessed day. Even if you're pissed off right now, I hope you at least think about what I've said, because by every step that is required of socialism, we're there. Freedom, what are you free to do? Seriously.